Alright, Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Yousaf Raza and we are doing a live webinar on managing mental health during the pandemic. This is being hosted by the Lums Religious Society, and I'm going to be talking about how to cope with the situation that has been created now that we are all under a lockdown. And of course there's the uncertainty of the entire situation as to how things are going to proceed and everything associated with that. So naturally, with everything that goes around that is happening in the world, that is being broadcast to us every day, a significant degree of anxiety is understandably resulting, and this is how it should be. This is what it's supposed to be like, right? Because there is a real threat out there. It's an anxiety, it's a normal reaction, a normal psychological reaction, which is necessary. It is protective. Just like when you're too close to a fire, you feel the heat, you move yourself away so that you don't hurt yourself. Just like that, there is psychological pain, which is a lot of times necessary for us to avoid getting hurt and take the necessary precautions. So if the anxiety created by the situation is such that we are conforming to all the precautions that are necessary, maintaining social distance, not going out unnecessarily, frequently washing hands, all of that. As long as we're doing all of those things, then this is what the anxiety is supposed to do for us. But then there are those of us who will, as a consequence of this massive routine change that has resulted because of the lockdown. You don't have your usual activities to go to. You don't have your usual social circles around you. Your workout routine may be disturbed. Your anything and everything that you were doing, your educational pursuits, all of that has gone off, right? Or at least it's being done in a very different way when you're at home. That again, whatever that change of routine is creating, the disturbance, the stress, that too is understandable. That too is pretty normal, right? That's not something which we would say is clinically significant. If it is clinically significant, if there is a significant degree of distress that you personally feel, whether that's a lot of anxiety or a lot of depression, right? Then what we're dealing with, typically, my reading would be that's triggering something that has already been there for a while. And what this pandemic has done, or what this lockdown has done, is that it has brought it out, right? It serves as a trigger. It serves as a precipitating factor, but the predisposition was already there in your personality, in your psyche for a long time. And my educated guess would be that this is not the first time you're experiencing whatever symptoms of depression or anxiety there are. Again, if that is the case, if this is what the situation has resulted in, then it's leading towards an insight. Even that kind of a pain, even that psychological distress is pointing towards a deeper level of precautionary measures that have to be taken. Some deeper psychological conflicts that require to be addressed, right? So a lot of times we are experiencing inexplicable depression and anxiety, or a depression and anxiety which is out of proportion with the triggering circumstances. So we have the triggering circumstances, which is this pandemic, which is the lockdown situation, which is your restricted social interactions, understandable anxiety, understandable stress in its own place. If it is out of proportion, then that is signifying some deeper level conflicts. Even that pain, it carries a meaning, right? And that meaning is that those conflicts, those psychological challenges need to be addressed. Additionally, this out of proportion anxiety or out of proportion depression may be a sign of a vacuum that is existing in our life, right? So hang on a second. Hello? I am live. I thought there was something wrong with the broadcast. That's why you called. Okay. I'm sorry. That was some of the people that I'm coordinating with. I thought there was something wrong with the broadcast. That's why they were calling. That's why I picked up. Anyways, so as I was saying, where was I? Yeah. So that kind of pain that is pointing towards an underlying psychological, deep-seated conflict that has to be addressed. That may be because of some past experiences, some relationship crises, whatever the case may be. Then there is a third level, that what this is signifying, what this is possibly indicative of. Again, we're still in the out of proportion anxiety, out of proportion depression, which doesn't make sense, that there is that understandable distress that this situation is going to cause, but then the out of proportion one reason for that I just indicated towards was those psychological conflicts. There is another significant reason, and that is what we would call, that is what Viktor Frankl would call an existential vacuum. That what this has highlighted, what this whole situation has unearthed, is an unheard cry for meaning. Like there is within every single human being this this deep-seated need, this will to meaning, this capacity, or this it's a thirst for living a meaningful life. And by occupying ourselves with various activities, which are routine activities, there doesn't necessarily have to be something wrong with them. They're just routine activities that you're doing, but they may not be sufficiently meaningful, right? They may not be signifying your meaning in life. And the more time you get out away from those distractions, in that case, that routine, that regular routine, is serving as a distraction. That there is a fire, and the alarm for that fire is the anxiety or the depression, or maybe other psychological symptoms as well. But keeping ourselves busy, having a really hectic routine, shuts out the alarm, but does not necessarily have to address the fire. Again, the fire may be that psychological conflict, that psychological challenges, unaddressed ones, or the existential vacuum, the emptiness of our general routine, of our lives, not having found the meaning that we need to find as our role in society. How do I make this world a better place? Right? How do I behave more meaningfully in my social interactions with my family, with my friends, with my larger society? Whatever it is that I'm doing, whether it is studying or working, how can I go beyond my job description to really meaningfully serve my field? Whether it's in academia or it's professionally, what can that possibly be? Right? So in a lot of ways, whether it is the routine anxiety, depression, the understandable anxiety, depression, the normal anxiety, depression that this has resulted in, that too requires management, right? And obviously, as it is within certain parameters. It hasn't really exceeded any particular limits. It is more manageable. It is more controllable. Engaging ourselves in a positive routine, trying to come up with alternatives of whatever it is that we were doing outside. There are ways of creating those circumstances inside, right? Thanks to the internet. More importantly, it is times of crises, and it is times of such challenges that lead for us to discover within ourselves as individuals a greater capacity for contribution, a greater capacity to be more innovative, to do things in more creative ways. Some of the greatest creations, some of the greatest inventions, some of the greatest progress that humanity has made has been precisely because of crises. Right? All of the World Wide Web, for example, in its very initial form, was a consequence of the Cold War, right? So there is that bright side, there is that silver lining. There are so many inventions of daily use. You just have to Google wartime inventions, and you'll find so many things that came out. So that can work for you as individuals as well. That can work for all of us as individuals, that in these times we find those dimensions of our personality that we never really had time to explore. So we may have found ourselves complaining time and time again that I really don't have enough time for this. I really don't have enough time for that. I wish I could have done this. I wish I could have done that. I really always wanted to read that book, just never got a chance. I wish I could work out my future plans in a more refined fashion. I wish I could get a chance to spend more time with my parents, with my siblings, with my friends. Just never do have enough time because of how crazy the routine is. So I'm guessing the routine is not as crazy now as it was before. So now that book that you've been putting off can get your attention. Now that activity, that working on your relationships that you were always talking about can get more attention. Those spiritual activities that you had lined up for yourselves that you had been procrastinating about, they can get more attention. Those intellectual questions that have always bogged you down and you've always wondered about and you've always wanted to spend more time researching and asking the right people about them, you have that time now. Right? You have more time now than you had before. So by all means, explore those opportunities. You find people, and one thing I will definitely say is, if there's a single most important thing that you have to do during this lockdown, it is working out. It is some form of exercise. Because I don't care if you're not the exercise kind of person. I don't care if you're not the kind of person who, you didn't go for a run, or you did not have a gym routine or any kind of workout routine. That's for that time, whatever. But now, staying indoors, you are moving 70% less or much more than that than you used to. At least before, you would walk from your living room to your car, and then from your car to your classroom, or at least that was something. There was some going up and down stairs or whatever. Now you're not doing any of that. You move from the bed to the sofa to the chair to the bed to the sofa to the chair and then to the toilet and then back, and that's basically it. So the amount of movement that your muscles were used to, it has gone down drastically. And so yes, necessarily that lack of movement, it results in brain changes, right? There's less neurotransmitters of the healthy kind, of the happy kind, that are secreted in your brain, and so that makes it all the more difficult for you to deal with the circumstances at home, and you're more irritable. You're gonna have a difficult time getting along with the kind of people with your own family that you really haven't connected with in a long time. Now you're going to be connecting with them in a more irritable fashion, right? So there is that. There is those workouts that you need to be focusing on. There's those neurotransmitters that need to start getting secreted. So go on YouTube, find out those workouts, those home workouts. There's simple, straightforward how to walk like 5 kilometers in your room. You know, they make you go 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and to the right, and to the left, and whatever. You had a gym routine. There's body weight workouts that you can replace that with to at least maintain whatever it is that you had before. And there are so many ways of doing pretty heavy exercises with stuff that you have commonly available in your house, right? There is so much use that you can make of that big water bottle, right? That we invert on our coolers, on our water coolers. You can use that. There's videos on how to use that as a weight. There's bags that you can fill up with books and you know, use them as alternatives to dumbbells. There is so much that can be done, right? So do all of that by all means. It is pretty unfortunate that when we do have yes, that did come from athlenex.com. No, my name is not yes, that was the inspiration for that little workout ideas for lockdown. Yes, take your broomstick and clean your room. That's not sufficient. That doesn't give you quite the kick that I'm talking about. But you made me lose track. What was I saying? Anyway, you get the point. So you have all of these alternatives to explore, and there's then, of course, for the more serious, out of proportion anxiety, depression that we're talking about, I would say you need to seek help. I would say you need to reach out. I'm sure there's past experiences that have happened. The more you ignore them, the more you brush them under the carpet. These are like the psychological conflicts. When they are brushed under the carpet, they don't remain the same. It's like monsters that may be like, you know, little tiny animals when you lock them up in your attic, but they grow to gigantic, ginormous monsters, and they find various ways out of that attic and are unrecognizable in the shape and form that they manifest themselves in. And that's very distressing. That is very distressing. So it calls for a professional addressal to be able to take those conflicts seriously, right? They may be even manifesting themselves in hyper-religiosity. They may be manifesting themselves in the most unrecognizable forms, and that's when it's the most scary, right? So you will find for example, a complete disarray of priorities, religiously speaking, in people who are religiously practicing, if those conflicts are underpinning the religious activism, right? So main important responsibilities with respect to interpersonal interactions and interpersonal relationships will be completely ignored, right? So my siblings, my parents, my friends, I am not fulfilling the rights that they have upon me, but the micro activities I am very intensely focused on. So just a very simple, straightforward example. And there's many such. It doesn't necessarily have to be hyper-religiosity. It may be a lot of social work, and all of that is good stuff, right? But if that's a compensation for some sort of suppressed guilt or repressed guilt, that's a problem that needs to be addressed, identified. And then finally, the existential vacuum that we spoke about, that unheard cry of meaning that's coming from within, to be able to address that, to answer the necessary questions, to give room for the doubts that open the way to answers that will then define your place in this world and your role in this world. A lot of times we simply, doubts are anxiety provoking as well. Guilt is anxiety provoking. Shutting yourself off to those natural human experiences, and then they manifest themselves in all these weird ways. And this may be an ideal opportunity to look at all of those things seriously and come out a better person, a more refined person. Again, we're not animals. When you confine animals in a cage, then yeah, they lose out on a lot. There's very little that they can do, and they become there's learned helplessness and all of that. But human beings, when restricted, they find pathways within themselves to dive deep, and then when that cage finally opens, they can come out as better human beings, as better people, as more self-aware, as more as people who have figured out or have started to figure out their way in life, right? So this is what we can make of all of what's going on. There is that attitude that is going to look to exploit others from the situation as it has developed, but then there is also that attitude that is going to look to help others as best as possible, right? So let's make the most of this time period. We have Ramadan coming up, so we have the extra time on our hands that the lockdown affords us for self-reflection, and then the spiritual environment and ambience that is created within Ramadan, which is this opportunity for intense spiritual focus and practices that further development. This is, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of good that if we open our eyes to it, it can really make the difference for us. Those of you who are entrepreneurs, I've said this before, I'll say it again, the difference between successful entrepreneurs by the end of the year 2020 is what they made of the time that they have right now during this lockdown. How much time did they spend reflecting? How much time did they spend planning? And then how did they come out better? How did they come out better? Right? So a few thoughts at the different levels of human existence, of our personalities, that our mental health challenges may be manifesting themselves, and how we can look to possibly address them. So if you have questions now, I will be looking to take them. So there you go. You have a lot of questions right here. How do I okay, let me look at the questions as they've been forwarded to me on my phone, if any. Okay, there aren't any as yet, but there are some here. Okay, so let me I cannot see all comments for some reason. Let me try to. Okay, there's something wrong with the way I'm accessing this. I cannot see all the comments that people are putting out. No, I am not a successful entrepreneur. Not yet, at least. I don't know. Okay. There's no questions here. Alright, organizers, I need help if people have, because it's telling me that there's 19 comments. I can only see a couple of them. Okay. Alright, people, so this is the point where you start pouring in with your questions, and I try to answer them as best as I can. If I sound sleepy, that's because I am, right? I spent the entire day with, session after session, and you get really drained by this time. So bear with me. How to deal with those monsters? Good question. The monsters that I spoke about that result from conflicts that have been going on for a very long time. First of all, the biggest mistake to make is that, oh no, that was a conflict that happened in my childhood. I've been able to overcome that. Okay, maybe you have. How? And if you cannot delineate how, if you're not clear as to how that process of overcoming those conflicts has taken place, then there's a mighty good chance that monster is disguising itself. And the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the people that he didn't exist. And that's precisely what these monsters do. They say that they're not there, that it's not really a problem. I don't have any problems. These psychiatrists, these psychologists, these are crackpots. They don't know what's going on. They're just, they're just throwing out their business card. That's why they want us to believe we're all crazy. We're not crazy, we're pretty okay. So that's the first thing that these monsters do. They don't look like monsters. They look pretty, they look like they're not there at all, right? So first of all, to acknowledge that, yeah, we all have our share. Some more than others. Some more than others. And usually what brings them out is an encounter with the other, right? We're too close to ourselves for this kind of an analysis. And it is in relating with others. It is, for a lot of the monsters, they came into being because of toxic experiences in earlier relationships or even later relationships, whatever the nature of those relationships. So to be able to identify them would be in the form of more therapeutic relationships, of non-toxic, more mature encounters with other people, right? With if you have good friends, good mentors, good teachers, that's how traditionally it has been. But for the scarcity of those resources, of those brilliant people as teachers and mentors, that gap is now being covered with professionals in mental health, in the field of mental health. So they're trained in helping people identify the effects of those monsters, the roots of where those monsters came from, and then how to deal with those different monsters. So that's the best way of dealing with them. That's the best way of dealing with them. There's other ways of dealing with them. I would advise a lot of writing, a lot of journaling, right? About your day, about your past, about significant events, about your thoughts about those events. Writing gives the level of clarity to the chaos that is in our minds that nothing else does. So we have to go around, find that time to write our hearts out and see how, in the long run, how therapeutic that can be. In the short run, that can actually bring out more anxiety. So, and that goes for therapy as well. That goes for any kind of meaningful, mature relationship that you have. It can trigger. It can get worse before it gets better. Right. So there's a fair warning with respect to that as well. Okay. Moving right along. What qualifies as a psychologically satisfied person? Okay, first up, I don't really agree with that as a primary goal. It can be being satisfied, being happy can be one of your goals, But if it is a primary goal, and more importantly, if it is the most important goal, then that is psychologically catastrophic. The reason for exacerbated anxiety and depression would be a thwarted desire for happiness and satisfaction. A naive conception that happiness and satisfaction is all of what I'm looking for, is the most important thing that I can ever have. And then chasing after it like crazy. So how Viktor Frankl associated that with the analogy that he drew was chasing after a butterfly. The more you run after it, the more it runs away from you. And the more you forget about it, the more it comes and sits on your shoulder. Right? So psychological satisfaction, when it becomes a goal, it's a self-defeating process. You are the least likely to achieve satisfaction precisely because you're running after satisfaction. And you're the most likely to be dissatisfied if satisfaction is all of what you're chasing. Right? So we have to be very, very careful as to what goals we set out for ourselves. The more meaningful those goals are, let's be honest here, the higher the meaning, the greater the meaning, the more personal the meaning, the closer to you that the meaning would be. You will have to face a lot of dissatisfactions. You will have to face a lot of disappointments, because it's not easy to want to change the world for the better, because there's a whole lot of bad out there, and you had to struggle. You're going to face disappointments. You're going to face loss. In a lot of ways, dissatisfaction is the motivation for action to begin with. Right? So a psychologically satisfied person may also be a very complacent person, may also be a very lazy person who doesn't have the drive, the push, or even the conscious decision to do more, to achieve greater. Right? So there's always that. So I wouldn't make that a yardstick for psychological well-being, that it's all about satisfaction. Yes, it can be one of those goals, and one of those goals which is best achieved as a byproduct of genuine struggle. I hope that answers somewhat. How do chronically ill make the best of this time? Okay. Again, that in itself, chronic illness is a fairly broad category. Especially different illnesses will bring with them a different degree of disability, a different level of handicap, right? But regardless of the situation of the illness that we are confronted with, see, whether it's the pandemic situation, the lockdown situation, or it is an actual illness, and if it is a chronic illness, then the attitude that we have, the attitude that we choose to address that situation with, is under our control. Right? So the choice, the freedom that a human being has, it always remains. It always remains, regardless of the situation. Regardless of the situation. So in a situation where I seem not to have any physical freedom, whether that is a freedom to get out of my house because of the lockdown, or get out of my chair because I have an illness that doesn't let me, right? Or function as fully as I was once capable of doing. In the face of such a situation, it's not that all freedom is gone. There is one freedom that has been taken away, yes. That freedom of movement, let's say, or some other functionality that is now, it doesn't come as naturally as it used to, and it's a struggle. But one freedom that hasn't been taken away, that can never be taken away, is the attitude that we maintain towards that illness. Do we allow for that illness to define us absolutely? Or do we muster the courage and the heroic potential that all human beings have in order to take it positively, in order to bear it with a smile, so to speak, and whatever functionality we do have, try to make the most of it. Try to make the most of it. Understandably, it is easier said than done. It is easier said than done. And we never go out looking for such difficulties. But we do ask ourselves, am I worthy? And that's Dostoevsky, where he said that there is only one thing that I fear, not being worthy of my suffering. And for the most of us listening to this, we may not have active illnesses or chronic illnesses, but there's a good chance that we will one day. And how we cope with that illness at that time, or those whatever challenges that we're confronted with at that time, is something that we prepare for now. For one thing, in terms of trying to prevent as best as possible for those situations from coming, or whatever is within our knowledge. But then, most importantly, the obstacles that we do face on a daily basis, the challenges and mundane sufferings, if you will, the day-to-day sufferings that we have to face, how do we confront those? With what kind of an attitude do we face up to those mundane sufferings? Getting stuck in the traffic, just catching a fever, being out cold for a couple of days, hitting your toe against the bed. How do you respond? How do you control your response to these instantaneous sufferings, let's say? The more we're able to bear these with positivity, with an accepting attitude, the more inspirational we're going to be in bigger, greater sufferings of chronic illnesses, let's say. There's a really good book, Tuesdays with Maury, a very good book, which talks about a heroic attitude in the face of inevitable suffering. And then, of course, Viktor Frankl's autobiography of his experiences in the concentration camp, and how logotherapy was born out of those experiences. That his heroic attitude resulted in an entire school of the most liberating school of thought in all of psychology, as far as I can tell. Right? So from all of those sufferings that he was confronted with in the concentration camps, the fruit of that is in front of you. That, like 70 years later, in a geographical land far, far away from Austria, I am not related to Viktor Frankl at all in any way. He is Jewish, I am Muslim, yet the fruits of his suffering, of his heroic attitude, is being related to you as we speak, as I speak right now, right, is what I learned from him. So, chronic illnesses, all kinds of physical handicaps that we're confronted with, they too are our opportunities. It's more difficult to see them, but when we do see them, what comes out of them is far greater and far more meaningful in a lot of ways. Okay, so Qasim Malik is asking a question that I am not going to repeat. You mentioned that you do more sessions. Are they similar to this one, and are they free of cost? If yes, could you share relevant sources? The more sessions that I do, they are one-to-one sessions, they are coaching sessions, they are counseling sessions, they are psychiatric sessions. I know they're not free, unfortunately, for the most part at least. So the sources, I guess, inbox me, my page. I have a website that goes with my name, yousafraza.com, spelled as you see it over here, and you get all the resources and all the relevant contact information over there. What if we ourselves are these monsters? Okay, that in itself was a monster speaking from within you. As human beings, we always have the capacity to be more than those monsters, right? To identify yourself as a monster, absolutely, as that monster and nothing else, is a cognitive distortion. Is that monster speaking? Is that monster deceiving us into believing what is not true, what cannot be true? So there is inherent evil in all human beings, right? When that evil leads for us to conclude that we are evil and nothing more, then it has the greatest opportunity to play itself out freely. But that's not true. Spiritually speaking, that's not true. Psychologically speaking, that's not true. So where we have that freedom to choose our attitude against physical suffering, environmental suffering, we also have that freedom to choose our attitude against the influences of the monsters as we spoke about, right? So the monsters inspire thoughts and feelings within us, right, of hatred, of animosity, of all of that. Whether we choose to act on them or not, that remains our choice, and it is that choice that we work to nurture, that capacity of making that choice that we work to develop and make stronger. And there is a definite role of being able to identify and distinguish the influences of those monsters from the better part of yourselves, and then allowing that best version of yourselves to predominate, choosing to act in accordance with that rather than anything else, right? Rather than whether those monstrous ideas come from outside or inside. Always remember the freedom to choose. Your response is something that no monsters control. Okay, how to not suppress our human experiences of guilt and sorrow. Very good. Is it possible? See, when we say that these are natural human experiences, that automatically is saying that they should be expressing themselves. That the guilt or the sorrow or grief should be finding an outlet. It should be manifesting. If something natural is not being manifested, then there is an obstacle in its path. Is that obstacle coming from a defense mechanism? Again, defense mechanisms, the kinds that we alluded to, calling them monsters. Again, identification of those defenses, those monsters, those ideas. And they may be coming from outside as well. For example, a kind of hyper-religiosity that is so strict and so unyielding that it doesn't even let you feel guilty, that it some thoughts and human emotions are declared unlawful, or that's the reading that we get, right? Or that's the understanding that we get of it. And so for that reason, it becomes all the more difficult to allow a natural guilt to come out. A kind of strict environment, whether that's religious or academic, either way, that doesn't let you make mistakes, that doesn't let you falter, that doesn't let you fall, that conceives of this idealistic, unrealistic, this suprahuman sinlessness that doesn't exist. Right? So bringing ourselves in sync with reality, keeping it real, is of the utmost importance. Getting rid of all of these corrupt concepts, wherever they came from. Because that's some monster disguising itself as a preacher or a teacher or a university professor, whatever the case may be, even a parent. And natural expressions of human experience are debarred. They become difficult. That's a problem. That's a serious problem. So okay. How do we have a healthier relationship with unpleasant emotions? For instance, a better way of dealing with guilt or grief. Again, we have to be very guilt, for example. It's signifying two things. Just by its presence, just by the fact that it's being experienced. If it is true guilt, there is false guilt, there is neurotic guilt. I'm not getting into those just yet. If it is true guilt, if it is genuine guilt, then it is signifying that there is a value that you hold dear to yourself, a moral value or a meaningful action that you felt you should have done, right? It also signifies that you had the freedom to do it, that you could have done it. And number three, so there's three things that it's signifying. Number three, it's signifying that there is still something that you can do about it in terms of repairing it, in terms of fixing it. So having reasonable relationships would mean to repair, to act, despite that unpleasant emotion. That unpleasant emotion is your greatest friend if it's leading for you to repair and fix something that can be fixed. That guilt is not true or is being neurotically dealt with if it is not resulting in action, rather it is resulting in more and more sulking, more and more wallowing in that unpleasant emotion and victimizing yourself and, just labeling yourself as evil or as a monster and not doing anything about it. Right? So looking to act positively as the guilt is directing us to. Okay, so that's one way of having healthier relationships despite those unpleasant emotions. Okay. Okay. Last question. How can we increase our self-esteem especially when we feel useless and not worthy. Okay, the feeling of uselessness, the feeling of not being worthy, these are also typically a consequence of some unfair labeling. That because of some previous experiences, whether it came from another person or it was our own judgment, when we definitively label ourselves as unworthy, maybe it was someone who was trying to discipline us and did overstep their boundary, and as a consequence of a mistake that we may have made, that we should have made, right? We should have made a lot of mistakes coming wherever we've come, but we're not really given the room to make those mistakes. And when you make mistakes, your humanity for making those mistakes is not acknowledged. Rather, you get labels of being a failure, of being incapable, of being useless, of being unworthy. And those are pathological comments. Those are toxic comments. And whether they're coming from a good place or not, they're having very bad effects on us. So for us to be able to identify the pathology there, the toxicity from where it's coming, and then understand that, you know what, if I did do things wrong, if I did make mistakes, who in the world doesn't? Who in the world doesn't? None of those mistakes, no matter how many they may have been, no matter how big they may have been, none of them gives anyone else or me the right to play God. In that, give definitive judgments on my ability, on my morality, or my inherent self-worth as a person. None of those actions, no matter what it is, gives anyone that right to pass as definitive a judgment as that, so as to give me a label that I have to wear. Because then when I'm wearing that label, I'm going to act according to that label. I'm going to be as that label wants for me to be. Right? So first off, detaching yourself from that label, and acknowledging the true guilt therein. Right? There is, in all of that mess, in all of that chaos, in all of that exaggeration, in all of that people playing God when they should not have been, there is some truth there about things that I may have done wrong. Let me find that and just look as to what it is that can be done to repair that. And yes, understandably, the negativity of the emotions, the overwhelming influence of my depression may not allow for me to repair everything. It cannot, it will not, definitely not overnight. So this is where I negotiate with my not so healthy psyche. And I say, okay, fair enough, I can't do all of it. Maybe fixing all of it or repairing all of those mistakes means working 6 hours a day. Can't do that, not with this mood, not with this depression. Can I pull off 50% of that? Maybe I can't. Can I pull off 1 hour? Can I pull off half an hour? Can I do 15 minutes? Let's start with 15 minutes. All right, let's do that. You get up, you try doing 15 minutes, job well done. You start to maintain that and up that as time goes on. You slip, you falter, you start again. Please understand the self-esteem that we envision for ourselves after having lost it to these unfortunate tendencies that people in authority seem to have around us. It's a process to get it back. because it comes with achievement. It comes with results. So give yourself that chance. Let yourself engage in the process. That slow grind that gives its fruits only in the long run. And after a lot of mistakes. The problem with a lot of us is that we associate our self-esteem with unrealistic ideals, which apparently we should already have. Not giving ourselves that space for the process that it is, and the mistakes that necessarily have to be made during that process. Right? So that's one of the fundamental lessons that we learn from the story of Adam in the Quran, alayhi salam. One of the fundamental lessons. But that's for another time. Thank you very much for being here, for all of your wonderful questions. I hope something of my soporific narrative, this monologue, was beneficial. I'm being too modest. It's really beneficial. It's really awesome. All of what I said. It's all a matter of being able to understand and engaging in the process of bringing it in in action, and then see the fruits thereof. Right? Thank you very much once again. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.